Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What are we digging into today?
Well, a lot of you have been asking about blockchain, so we're tackling that head on.
Yeah, blockchain is definitely one of those buzzy terms everyone's heard, but not everyone fully gets, right?
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
So we got this super interesting podcast episode all about the basics of blockchain. And we figured let's break it down together.
Awesome. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, so the goal here isn't to turn anyone into a crypto trader or anything like that. It's more about understanding how blockchain actually works, like the tech behind it.
Yeah, like demystifying it a bit.
Exactly. And then who knows, maybe we'll even uncover some surprising ways it could be used beyond just Bitcoin and all that.
Absolutely. The potential applications are huge, but first, gotta nail the fundamentals, right?
Totally. So the podcast starts with this analogy of blockchain being like a digital record book, a ledger.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one before.
Yeah, it's kind of like instead of writing down transactions on paper, you're doing it digitally on this blockchain.
Okay, that makes sense, but I guess what makes blockchain special? Like, what sets it apart from just any old database?
Well, that's where those three key features come in: decentralization, immutability, and transparency.
Oh, yeah, those are the big ones, right?
Definitely huge. And I think decentralization is a good place to start since the podcast really emphasizes that.
Makes sense. It's like the foundation of the whole thing.
So imagine instead of having like one bank or one company in charge of the ledger, with blockchain, it's spread across a whole network of computers.
Ah, so it's not controlled by any single entity.
Exactly. Which is pretty cool when you think about it because it means there's no single point of failure.
Right. Like if one computer goes down, the whole system doesn't just crash.
Exactly. And plus, it's way harder for someone to hack into it or manipulate it because they'd have to control like a majority of the network.
Yeah, that's where the whole immutability thing comes in, right?
Totally. Once a transaction is recorded on the blockchain, it's basically set in stone.
Like tamper-proof, the podcast even calls it.
Yeah, because each transaction is cryptographically linked to the previous one, creating this unbreakable chain.
Oh, wow. So you can't just go back and change something without everyone knowing.
Exactly. And that brings us to transparency, which means anyone on the network can see the entire transaction history.
So it's all out in the open, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and that level of transparency helps build trust, right? Things aren't being hidden or manipulated behind the scenes.
Definitely makes it more accountable.
So yeah, the three things together, decentralization, immutability, and transparency, that's what makes blockchain so unique.
And potentially revolutionary, right?
Exactly. But before we get too carried away with the possibilities, let's zoom in on how a Bitcoin transaction actually works, step by step.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
So say I want to send some Bitcoin to you.
All right, hit me with that Bitcoin.
Well, first, that transaction gets broadcasted across the entire blockchain network.
Wait, so it goes to every single computer on the network?
Yep. Or more specifically, to all the nodes.
Nodes. Sorry, quick reminder. What are nodes again?
Oh, right. Nodes are basically just computers that are connected to the blockchain network. They all have a copy of the ledger, and they work together to keep everything running smoothly.
Got it. So the more nodes there are, the more decentralized and secure the network becomes.
Exactly. Okay, so my transaction's out there, floating around the network. Then what happens?
Well, that's where the miners come in.
Ah, yes, the famous miners.
These are special nodes that have the power to verify your transaction. They make sure you actually have the Bitcoin you're trying to send and that everything follows the rules of the blockchain.
Right, and to do that, they have to solve those super complicated math problems, right?
Got it. It's called proof of work, and the first miner to solve the puzzle gets to add your transaction to a new block on the chain.
And they get rewarded with Bitcoin for their efforts, right?
Exactly. It's like a little incentive to keep the network secure and running smoothly.
Makes sense, but isn't all that computing power kind of energy intensive?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Some folks are definitely worried about the environmental impact of proof of work.
So are there any alternatives?
Well, there's proof of stake, which is designed to be way more energy efficient, but it's a whole other conversation.
Maybe for another deep dive.
Definitely. But for now, let's get back to our transaction.
Okay, so the miner solves the puzzle, adds the block to the chain. But how do we know this new block is legit and hasn't been tampered with?
This is where that cryptographic hashing magic comes in. Each block has this unique digital fingerprint, you could say.
And if someone tries to mess with the data in a block,
even a tiny little change would completely alter its fingerprint.
breaking the link to the previous block, essentially breaking the chain.
Exactly. And everyone on the network would immediately know something's fishy.
So it's like that tamper-proof seal, but digital.
Yep. Pretty clever stuff, right?
Definitely. And that's why people are so excited about blockchain. It's this super secure and transparent way to record information.
And while it started with cryptocurrency, there's so much more it can do.
Like what?
Well, think about supply chains. You could track a product's journey from start to finish, ensuring its authenticity and ethical sourcing.
Oh, wow. That's a great example.
Or even secure voting systems that are resistant to fraud and manipulation.
That would be huge.
Right. The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
Totally. But I guess the big question is, as blockchain becomes more widespread, are there any downsides we need to be aware of?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Every technology has its pros and cons, and understanding those trade-offs is crucial.
So maybe that's something for our listeners to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive.
Definitely. What are the potential downsides of this powerful technology? How do we ensure it's used ethically and responsibly?
Great questions to think about. And hey, if you have any insights, feel free to share them with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of the conversation, and we're all learning together.
Thanks for joining us on this blockchain adventure, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.